After that last section, which was probably pretty difficult for you guys, this section is very easy, but it is very foundational. So don't just try to get your way through it. Make sure you're very confident, very comfortable with this stuff. I know you should have done it last year, so hopefully it still sticks from last year. But this is going to be a review of basically setting up our trig ratios using SOHCAHTOA. So if you remember, let's just say this is our angle, x. The reference angle always goes inside So the reference angle always goes inside the trig function. So it's important to identify what your reference angle is. Because if your reference angle instead was over here, if this was x, then this would no longer be opposite. This would be opposite because it's across from x. So it all has to do in reference to your reference angle. So hypotenuse is the one that's always just there. It's going to be across from a right angle. So that's always a hypotenuse. So that's never a concern. But opposite, what opposite is, notice opposite is across from the reference angle. And then the adjacent side, so opposite is across from the reference angle. And the adjacent side is, if you start with the reference angle and trace to the right angle, that's the adjacent side. So it's really important that you guys get that down. It's not that difficult though. So from the reference angle, so you look at whatever the reference angle is, opposite is across from it, adjacent is the one next to it. Technically means next to, but you just trace it from the angle to the right angle, because notice the hypotenuse is also next to our reference angle. But if this is the hypotenuse, that means that this would have to be the adjacent side. And the hypotenuse we know is always across from the right angle, so that one should always identify. So sine, this looks like a hard thing to memorize, but that's the whole point of SOHCAHTOA. Notice sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So SOH, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. So SOHCAHTOA, you could write it out each time, and it's going to really help you. So let's just do an example real quick. I have these examples down here. We'll get to them in a little bit. So just drawing a triangle. It has to be a right triangle. This is right triangle trig for a reason, and that's because it has to be a right triangle. So classic right triangles, 3, 4, 5. So if we want sine of A, you start by identifying the reference angle. What's the reference angle? Sine of A, the reference angle is A, right? So referring to that angle A, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite is 4 over the hypotenuse is across from the right angle is 5. Cosine of A. Well, adjacent to A is 3, because that's the one that we can trace the right angle, over the hypotenuse is 5. How do we know it's adjacent over hypotenuse? Remember, that's C-A-H. Cosine's adjacent over hypotenuse. Then last we have tangent would be opposite of A, which is 4, because it's across from it, over the adjacent side, which is 3. Now let's switch it up a bit. Let's just say we wanted sine of B. Now everything completely changes. B is our new reference angle. So in reference to B, our opposite, because sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so in reference to B, our opposite is now 3 over the hypotenuse of 5. Notice the hypotenuse always stays the same. Cosine of B, well, that would be adjacent to B is 4 over 5. And last, tangent of B is opposite of B, which is 3, over the adjacent side, which is 4. So there you go. Those are the 3 trig functions and setting it up. And you just got to be careful of that reference angle. Kind of an interesting note. Notice sine and cosine are the same. Why? Because opposite of A is the same as adjacent to B. So sine of A and cosine of B are the same, just like cosine of A and sine of B are the same. And then tangents are always just going to be flipping them, basically. See, there's 4 over 3, that's 3 over 4. And so that's just a brief example. We'll go through these next 3 examples in the next video. Those should be